Hi, Doug Miles and Don Henderson. We're on Sports Talk here. Thanks for joining us tonight. And just want to introduce you properly. You've written a book called Boston's 100 Greatest Games. We talked a little bit earlier about it, so tell us a little bit about how it came about.
Well, it came about really from a desire to, having watched the Boston teams play this sort of game of can you top this since 2001, I thought it would be fun to just sit down and rank some of these great games that have been played in Boston over the last 10 or 15 years, and also going back all the way to the beginning of professional sports in Boston, and see if I can come up with some kind of rational order for ranking those games. And when I started out, I was a little concerned that I might have a hard time coming up with 100 games, but the difficulty ended up being in cutting it down to 100 games. So it was really a fun exercise.
Well, I'll tell you, you certainly had great material to work with, and I don't know about going back into the 20s and 30s in the old days, but I can start in 1947, 48, the Yankees and Red Sox coming down to the wire to first of all get clinch the American League pennant, and Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio going head to head, and boy, they had some great series in that period of time between 47 and 52.
Yes, it's actually kind of a shame that they didn't have the expanded playoffs back then, so that those guys could have had some postseason series back then.
We were talking earlier, Rob, about Ted Williams. A book came out about him as well. I know a lot of your games in your book talk about Ted. Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. I would have loved to have met him. He was, if I had one of those bucket lists where you could just pick 10 guys you'd love to have a conversation with about sports, he would certainly have been on it, I think.
Well, let's break it down a little bit. Maybe start with your top five. Start with five, and then go 4, 3, 2, 1, and then if there's something you want to expand on, we'll go there.
Okay. Well, I actually cheated a little bit with my top five.
Oh.
Because I picked, for number one, wasn't cheating. I picked Super Bowl 36 when the Patriots beat the Rams in February 2002. I just thought that game had all the elements, because it was their first championship, and they won it on the last play, and coming as it did on a season when no one expected them to do anything, when Tom Brady replaced Drew Bledsoe as quarterback. It was just such a surprise that for a single individual game, I think in Boston history it would be difficult to top that one. And I know a lot of people think that in 2004, when the Red Sox came from 0-3 down to beat the Yankees and then won the World Series, should have been number one. But the problem I had was just trying to isolate one of those games from 2004 that stood out more than the others. And so that's why I cheated a little bit with 2 through 5, and I picked 4 games that they won against the Yankees to come back from 0-3. So that's my top 5, the Patriots, and then 3 from 0-4 for the Red Sox.
Well,
I still don't know how
I don't think you can go wrong there. I think all Boston fans are going to remember almost every pitch of those 4 games. The only one that would jump out at me is the home run against Cincinnati that went to the 7th game. That would get in my top bracket somewhere. Yeah,
I've had a little bit of feedback on that one. I have that one at number 30 actually, and the reason I did it that way was I tried to come up with some criteria for ranking the games, and one of the criteria that figured pretty heavily was whether or not the Boston team ultimately won a championship that year. And of course, in '75 against the Reds, they lost Game 7, so that was one of the reasons I knocked it down a few pegs, because they ended up losing the series that year, although they won that incredible Game 6 that year.
Right.
I still don't know how your Red Sox beat my Yankees down 0-3, Rob. I still don't believe it happened. They keep showing it on the classic. I still don't know how it happened.
Yeah, I think that's a common feeling in New York, I believe.
Well, Rob, I think the interesting part about it is that once that momentum shifts in almost every sport, and in that particular series, it looked like the Yankees were going to walk away, no question, up 3-0. But when that momentum starts to switch, all of a sudden, strange things start to happen.
That's true. I mean, I remember kind of feeling that at the time. By the time even during Game 5, before that was even over, it was a weird dynamic, because it felt like the Yankees were chasing the Red Sox, even though they were up 3-1 at the time. It just felt like you could feel there was such a shift in the momentum that It just felt like if the Red Sox won that Game 5, then it was really going to be wide open.
Rob, I guess the biggest hockey moment of all time for Boston fans got to still be Bobby Orr, right, in the 1970 Stanley Cup Final, diving through the air, huh?
Well, that's on the list. It's near the. I forget actually. I have to cheat a little bit here. I forget where I ended up putting that one ultimately. It was number 22. I had that one. I actually had a game from 2011 ranked higher than that one, just because even though it was the 1970 win with Bobby Orr was for the championship, it was a 4-game sweep. So one of the other criteria I used was the amount of drama in a given series, and so with the 2011 championship coming down to the 7th game, I thought one of the games from that year was maybe a little bit higher.
Well, you could pick out so many games with the Boston Celtics, and a couple that I remember right off the top of my head when I was broadcasting the 76ers, when Havlicek stole the ball. That had to be one of the great games in my memory. And, of course, there's a ton of games between Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain that I can remember. I don't know where you have any of those games ranked, but I'll tell you, they'd be right up there with my book.
Yeah, Havlicek stole the ball. Obviously, that's in the top 20 or top 25. And then, of course, there were plenty of games on there with Bill Russell's Celtics. You had to include them, and including a couple that I was unaware of that I think are kind of underrated. There was It was Game 4 against the Lakers in 1969 when the Celtics were down 1 point, and the Lakers had the ball with 14 seconds to go, and the shot clock was off, so all they had to do basically was make their free throws and take care of business, and yet Emmett Bryan stole the ball for the Celtics, and Sam Jones hit a shot at the buzzer, and the Celtics ended up winning to square the series at 2 games each, and they ended up going on to win that one in 7 games. But that was kind of a lesser-known one, but that Emmett Bryant steal really was almost as big as Havlicek's. You just don't know about it as much, probably because he didn't have the great soundbite from Johnny Most to go with it, I guess.
I'll tell you, Johnny Most was one of the greats. I mean, there are certain guys, that Bob Prince in Pittsburgh with baseball, and excuse me, Johnny Most up in Boston, Bill Campbell down in Philly with me, and some great guys, and they were a big part of those games. I mean, Johnny Most was the game.
I was just going to say, I really miss Johnny Most in a season like this one for the Celtics, because then you could put on the game and still enjoy it, even though the Celtics are going nowhere this year. You could always enjoy just for listening to him.
And I'll tell you, he lived and died with them losing. I'll tell you that.
Oh, I know.
I remember watching this one, Rob. The one you have is number 6, the great triple overtime game, Celtics and the Phoenix Suns. Was that Garfield Hurd who kept making those shots to keep it going?
Yeah, that's the one. He's the one who sent it into that third overtime. That was just that was an unbelievable game. I watched the whole game again recently. I found a video of it, and Brent Musburger was doing the call, and it was just,
right.
Even though it's one of those games where even though you know how it's going to end, you still find your palms starting to sweat again.
Well, I know in Boston, they're not like Yes in New York, where they only put wins on. They don't the Yankees, you only see them win. You never see them lose a game.
Well, what do you rank the Red Sox and Mets 86, Rob?
That one did not make the list for the. I actually put a little explanation of that at the beginning, saying that you won't find the Bill Buckner or the Grady Little games in this book, and then I just said, do I really need to explain why?
It was a great game, though.
It was. That's what I said. An objective observer would say it was a great game, but once you get inside Massachusetts, you're not talking about too much objectivity when it comes to that series.
Well, I'll say though, things have changed with Bill Buckner because, excuse me, I know he comes back now every once in a while. They have a dinner or something like that. For a long, long period of time, he was very adverse to going back and taking any heat about that, which, it's a baseball player. You can't do anything about that. People make errors, but boy, oh boy, that was some error, and he didn't want to come back, but I understand now he does.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I don't think, obviously you can't put the whole thing on him, and in fact, one of the pleasures of doing the book was there was an earlier game from '86 when they rallied against the Angels when they were down 5-2 in the 9th inning in an elimination game, and they ended up rallying to win that game. And everybody around here remembers Dave Henderson's home run that put him up, and then they eventually won an extra inning. But Yep, that's right. But the guy who started the whole rally was Bill Buckner. And if he didn't get on base earlier in the inning to start all that, they never even make the World Series. So that's why it's dangerous to put too much on one player the way people around here did on Buckner for so long. I don't think he ever deserved it.
Well, Rob, I'll give you a personal side of that story was the fact that Gene Walk, of course, blew it in Philadelphia in 1964. People never forgot what happened there and the way he managed the last 10 games of the season. What does he do? He goes out to L.A. Looks like he's going to put the thing away. And Henderson hits a home run, and Gene Walk loses again. And there were a lot of people who didn't feel too sad about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Was that Philadelphia Schadenfreude when that happened, I think?
Well, the thing that was that, Gene in his earlier days, a foul ball would go up in front of the, Phillies dugout or something, and the opposing catcher would come over and, once you stepped over that line, I don't do it anymore, but in those days, once you step over that line at the dugout, and Gene would waffle a guy. He was blood and guts, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and that's, one of those guys that you love him if he's on your team, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't even think you loved him in Philly, even though he was on the team.
I guess not, after what happened in '64, huh?
You got a great one here, Rob. I've seen the special they've done on ESPN again with the going back and reliving this game, the Harvard-Yale 29-29 game. That was an all-time classic in college football, huh?
Yeah, I think that was. I think that makes a good argument for why. I think they should have kept tie games in football, and that game there is a perfect explanation explanation of why I think that ties ought to just be allowed to stand sometimes. I was saying at the end of that one because with the tie, the two teams were tied going into the game for the Ivy League title, and of course they ended up still being tied afterward. And I was saying I don't think Yale could have felt any worse if they had lost the game than if they had been forced to share it with Harvard under those circumstances. So I just don't think you could have beat a tie in that game.
Well, I think it depends on the sport. I have to really say that I wasn't a great guy for ties. I remember the Michigan State Notre Dame game. Some of the great games. I'd like to have seen a winner come out of it. And I obviously wasn't around for that game, but the Harvard-Yale game. But I sort of enjoy the idea that they come up with a formula. I don't like the shootout necessarily in hockey, but at least they try to find a way to have a winner.
Right. I think it's appropriate in some sports, but in football, I still think they should have left regular season ties alone in the NFL, because to me they serve as a good tiebreaker at the end of the year. That way, instead of having a bunch of teams all at 9-7, and you have to go to this third level tiebreaker to figure out who makes the playoffs, if you've got a 9-6-1 team in there, you break the tie.
Can't disagree with that.
Rob, how did you kind of do the research? Obviously, some of the later games, you could go back, I guess, see some highlighted films or videotape, but some of the real old-time games, I guess, the old archive of newspapers? Is that how you did some of the research?
Yeah, that's how I did a lot of it. It's honestly, it's a lot easier to research something like that nowadays because there are a lot of newspapers that have their old archives searchable online now, and you can also go to sites like sportsreference.com, and they have whole box scores and game-by-game results from years ago, and you can just go back and it's like putting a puzzle together. You look at a box score, and then you say, this looks like an interesting game, and then you go find a newspaper account about it, and then you just sort of piece it together that way and decide, you know what, that sounds like a game I really wish I would have seen.
Well, Rob, Ben Bradley Jr. was in town yesterday, sort of spearheading his book, The Red Sox. I have not had a chance to read it yet. As I say, he was in town yesterday at Barnes & Noble, but I didn't have a chance to get over there. Have you had a chance to see it at all, or sort of? No,
I haven't had a chance to. I'm way behind on my list. I've got a whole big stack of books here I've yet to get to, but that sounds like one I want to have on my list too.
That's not a book. That's a Bible. I think I'd take you all summer to read that one.
Well, Rob, your book.
Well, it sounds like a good way to spend the summer.
It's one of those you can just kind of leaf through it and read about a couple of the games. I think you don't have to be a Boston fan to like it. Teams, fans of other teams that played Boston are going to enjoy this, I think. And it's published by Candlepin Press. You have a website, Rob? People get a hold of the book.
Yeah, the simplest way to do it is you just go to Amazon.com. You can find it there, or you could just go to 100greatestgames.com. That's the website. But if you're just looking for the book and you want to find it quick, the best way is to just go to directly to Amazon.
And the drone will deliver it right to your house.
That's correct.
Well, you must have had a great deal of fun in researching and writing the book because, I think if you look at Boston, New York, and Detroit, I mean, L.A. in some areas basketball certainly would fall in there, but I don't think there are any cities like Detroit, Philadelphia, and New York and Boston. I think they're the bread and butter of all sports as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I would agree. You could maybe throw Chicago in there too, but definitely the ones you pointed out, I would agree with. Something special about those places.
Unfortunately, Chicago hadn't had enough winners.
Yeah, you're right. We'd have to do 10 greatest games there.
They've had some great games with the football operation, but their baseball
and the hockey
and their hockey, they've had some problems.
Yeah.
Rob, appreciate you taking a few minutes tonight. I know the weather's probably not all that great where you are up in New Hampshire, but we're thinking of you down here in Florida.
Yeah, I bet you are. It's going down to 5 below here tonight.
Oh, no.
It was only 80 here today, Rob.
Oh, you poor guys. Every time somebody tells me this is a winter wonderland, I tell them, yeah, every winter I wonder why I live here.
Well, thank you so very, very much. It was great chatting with you, and I'll look forward to picking the book up and have breezing through it because always had a lot of fun with the rest.